All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to look at something pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of the intersection between economics and physics.
Sounds good.
And, it's kind of cool. You can look at different fields and see
Yeah.
how they overlap
Yeah.
and some of the principles
Absolutely.
that connect them.
So often we think in these silos, right? Like
Yeah.
physics is over here and economics is over here.
Right.
But when you step back and you see these underlying patterns,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah, and we see that today with the law of supply and demand
Okay.
and how it kind of has this
Interesting.
mirror image
Yeah.
in the world of physics.
Looking forward to it.
So let's start off with supply and demand, something that I think most people are familiar with,
Sure.
at least in a very basic sense from school.
High School Economics 101.
Right, exactly. But just to kind of recap, basically when the price of something goes up, demand tends to go down.
Right. Makes sense.
People don't want to buy as much of it.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And on the other hand, when the price goes up, suppliers are more likely to want to produce more of that thing.
Right, because they can make more profit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've got these two kind of competing forces.
Yeah, the buyers and the sellers kind of pushing and pulling.
Right, and where they meet. That's what we call market equilibrium.
Exactly. And that's what determines both the price of something and how much of it is out there in the market.
Right, like a limited edition pair of sneakers.
Perfect example.
Everybody wants them right when they first come out.
Oh, yeah.
Prices are crazy.
Sky high.
And then as more become available and the hype dies down a little bit,
The price starts to settle.
it settles to a point where...
It finds that balance.
Right.
Where the people who are willing to buy at that price matches the number of sneakers that are available.
Right. So we've got this idea of equilibrium in markets.
Okay.
Now let's jump over to physics. And we're going to talk about Hooke's law, and I'm going to need your help on this one because physics was not my
Yeah, I get that a lot.
strong suit.
Yeah.
So what is Hooke's law, and what does it have to do with springs?
So Hooke's law is all about springs and how they behave
Okay.
when you stretch them or compress them.
Right.
And it basically says that the force that you need to apply to a spring to stretch it or compress it is directly proportional to the distance that you stretch it.
Okay.
So if you imagine pulling on a rubber band,
Yeah.
the harder you pull, the farther it stretches, right?
Right.
That's basically what Hooke's law is describing, that relationship between the force and how much it stretches.
Okay, I get that. And that
It's
seems
pretty intuitive.
pretty simple. But
Yeah.
how does
Yeah.
how do springs and forces
Yeah.
relate back to economics?
Right.
Like we're talking about buyers and sellers and markets.
Yeah.
Where's the connection?
So the connection really lies in this concept of elasticity. And, we talk about elasticity in economics,
Right.
but it also exists in physics.
Yeah.
So in economics, elasticity is basically describing how sensitive the quantity demanded or supplied is to a change in price.
Right.
So for example, if the price of something goes up a little bit
Yeah.
and the quantity demanded drops a lot,
Okay.
then we would say that that good is very elastic.
Okay.
It's very sensitive to changes in price.
Got it.
Now, in physics, elasticity is referring to how easily a spring stretches or compresses.
Okay.
So, you have some springs that are really stiff,
Right.
and you have to pull really hard to get them to stretch.
Yeah.
And then you have other springs that are really loose,
Right.
and they stretch really easily.
Right.
So we describe that using the spring constant, which is denoted by the letter K.
Okay.
And a higher K value means a stiffer spring.
Okay, so a market with a really high elasticity
Yes.
would be like a loose spring,
Exactly.
like a small change in price.
Huge change in quantity.
Huge impact. Okay, but what about a market that's not very elastic?
Right. So that would be like a stiff spring
Okay.
where you need a big change in price to really affect the quantity.
To see any movement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like gasoline.
Yeah.
Even if the price goes up, people still need to drive.
They still got to get to work.
Exactly. So the demand doesn't change that much.
So it's not as sensitive to price changes.
Exactly.
Okay, so it seems like both of these systems,
Mm-hmm.
both markets and springs, are kind of always searching for this balance.
Yeah, that's right.
Like markets are looking for this equilibrium,
Yeah.
and springs want to go back to their
They're a resting state.
resting state.
Yeah.
Is that a coincidence, or is there something deeper going on?
I think it's deeper than a coincidence.
Okay.
I think what we're seeing here is this fundamental principle of equilibrium that shows up in all sorts of systems.
Yep.
Not just physical systems, but economic systems as well.
So it's not just about finding that balance point.
Yeah,
It's about how these systems react.
Exactly.
when things change.
Exactly how they respond to change.
Right. And in physics, we can see that there are literal forces acting on the spring, like pushing it or pulling it.
You're literally applying force
Right.
to stretch that spring.
What would be the equivalent of forces in an economic system?
So in an economic system, those forces are anything that can shift the supply or demand curves.
Okay.
So you could have government policies like taxes or subsidies that can affect the cost of producing something or the price that consumers pay. You could have technological innovations that come along and completely disrupt an industry. You could have changes in consumer preferences, fashion trends. All of these things are like forces.
They're pushing and pulling on the market.
That's right. They're constantly shifting those curves.
Okay. I was reading about this analogy and I thought it was really helpful. It was using a spring and weights to kind of represent supply and demand.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic.
So like you have one weight that represents demand and another that represents supply. And you can add or remove weight to kind of simulate what happens when demand increases or supply decreases.
And you see the whole system adjust.
And the whole system adjusts.
To find that new balance point.
To find that new equilibrium.
Exactly.
I thought that was a really cool
it's a great
way to kind of visualize it.
Yeah, it really captures the essence of how these markets behave.
So they're not these like static things.
No, they're dynamic.
They're constantly moving and reacting and trying to find that balance.
That's right. They're always seeking equilibrium, just like spring.
That's so cool. So I guess the main takeaway here is that economics and physics might seem like totally different fields. But they actually have some really fundamental similarities.
Absolutely.
They're both systems that they both involve these forces. And they're both always trying to find this state of equilibrium.
That's right.
It's like there's this hidden language.
Yeah, a hidden connection.
Of patterns that connects them.
It really is.
So I guess that kind of raises the question, if markets naturally tend towards equilibrium, like a spring going back to its resting state, what does that mean for things like government intervention?
Should we try to control these forces?
Yeah.
Or should we just let the system sort of work itself out?
Are we just messing things up?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer.
But it's something to think about.
Definitely something to ponder.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I had no idea physics could be so relevant to economics.
It's all connected.
Yeah, it really is. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See ya.